Did you know that Benjamin Franklin couldn't walk to the signing of the Constitution on his own 2 feet? Franklin was 81 years old and suffering from gout. He was in too much pain to walk far, but he was a hugely important, respected leader in the colonies and a founding father, so he had to be there. The solution? 4 prisoners from the nearby Walnut Street jail were brought to carry Franklin into Independence Hall on a sedan chair. What a way to make an entrance! Creating a Constitution. What was the process that led America to adopt a constitution? What rights and responsibilities did that document capture? Throughout this video series, we will be looking at how early America often struggled as it expanded geographically and developed politically, economically, and socially. An example of geographic expansion is when America's borders were maintained or grew either through war or treaty. An example of political struggle is when policies are created that either restrict or increase the federal government's powers, states' powers, and citizens' rights. Economic struggles include when business and trade policies are restricted, economic opportunities are not equal, or established labor systems limit people's rights. Lastly, we'll be looking at social and cultural development, or how America struggled with inclusion and ensuring rights for all its citizens. This video will entail Section 1. Political Development. Emerging from an era of an oppressive English monarchy, a brand new America reluctantly created a government structure that eventually proved weak. Section 2. Political and Economic Development. The Founding Fathers borrowed ideas from Enlightenment thinkers to create a constitution that reflects the needs of both small and large states in both the North and South. Section 3. Social and Cultural Development. How some of the Founding Fathers believed the Constitution alone was not enough. So the new Constitution was created to include a Bill of Rights intended to protect the rights of its citizens. Section 1. Political Development. America reluctantly created a loose government structure called the Articles of Confederation that proved too weak to last more than 6 years. The nation's first attempt at setting up a government was drafted by the First Continental Congress in 1777, but was signed at the close of the American Revolution in 1781. This Congress wrote the Articles of Confederation. One key motivation they had was to prevent any central person or group from having too much power. The individual states operated more independently than a united front. Remember, they just got rid of a king. The Founding Fathers wanted to make sure the central government of America couldn't do any of the things King George had done before the Revolution. Therefore, the federal government was deliberately weak. However, it soon became clear that the weak Confederation government lacked the money and the power to manage the various conflicts that arose among the states. According to the Articles of Confederation, the central government could only ask for money. They could not require taxes paid to the federal government. Furthermore, since the Articles of Confederation could only be amended by a unanimous vote of the states, proposed changes were almost impossible. Which of the following describes the power of the government under the Articles of Confederation? Strong, unlimited, well-funded, weak. If you answered D, you are right. The government was too weak to get things done or to even fund itself through taxes. Section 2. Political and Economic Development. The Founding Fathers created a constitution that reflected the needs of both small and large states in both the North and South. Luckily, the creators of the Constitution did not have to start from scratch. Philosophers and political scientists have thought about the best way to govern for centuries. Our founders drew on the examples of ancient Greece, the Roman Republic, and many European thinkers from the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. For instance, they used John Locke's ideas about natural rights. He believed that all people were born with the right to life, liberty, and property, and that no one could take these rights away. Locke also wrote, "The government should get its power from the consent of the governed, the agreement of the people." If the government failed to protect people's rights, they could withdraw that consent and rebel by overthrowing the government. Baron de Montesquieu introduced the idea of separating powers within a government into different bodies or branches. However, not everyone agreed on exactly how to set up the government. One of the most significant sticking points was how to determine representation. How many votes would each state get in the legislative branch, which makes the laws? The Virginia Plan, known as the Large State Plan, was drafted by James Madison of Virginia. The Virginia Plan proposed a legislative branch consisting of two houses called a bicameral legislature. This means each state would be represented in proportion to their population. As Madison worded it, representation would be based on quotas of contribution or to the number of free inhabitants. States with a large population, like Virginia, would have more representatives than smaller states. On the other hand, smaller states generally opposed it. Smaller states preferred William Patterson's New Jersey Plan, which proposed a single-house legislative branch. In the New Jersey Plan, each state would have one vote regardless of size. They argued that each state should have equal representation in the nation's lawmaking process. In the end, the convention settled on the Connecticut Compromise, also known as the Great Compromise. It created a bicameral legislative branch. In the House of Representatives, the number of legislators is proportionate to the population. Larger states have more votes. In the Senate, each state is equally represented. The Constitution established 3 branches of government, keeping with Montesquieu's ideas about separation of power. These 3 branches can all review or change the actions of the others in some way. This is called the system of checks and balances. It prevents any one part of the government from getting too strong. The judicial branch is the court system. It was responsible for interpreting the laws and settling legal disputes. The judicial branch can check the legislative branch by judging whether or not laws are constitutional. It can check the executive branch by reviewing executive orders. The legislative branch was responsible for making laws. As explained earlier, it had 2 houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The legislative branch passes the budget and controls how the government spends its money. It can check the executive branch by overriding a presidential veto to pass a law anyway. It can check the judicial branch by voting whether to approve federal and Supreme Court judges. The executive branch consists of the president and their cabinet of advisors. The president is also the commander-in-chief of all the armed forces. Today, the executive branch contains thousands of workers in many departments who implement the government's policies. For example, it can check the judicial branch by appointing judges. It can check the legislative branch by approving or vetoing, rejecting laws that they pass. While the new nation was coming together with a stronger national government, it was still quite divided in many ways. For example, economically, the northern and southern regions were very different. Due to geographical differences, the South was much more agricultural, while the North had a manufacturing economy. This also meant that the South was much more dependent on the labor of enslaved persons. There was still a considerable number of enslaved workers on farms and plantations. This divide also caused a constitutional controversy over how to count enslaved persons for the purposes of determining votes in the legislature. Southern states wanted to include them in the population count so they would have more votes, even though enslaved people could not vote. This was even more complicated because states were also taxed according to this count. In this 3/5 compromise, an enslaved person was counted as 3/5 of a person. So, Southern states got more votes, but also had to pay some additional taxes. Of course, to our modern eyes, this is just another example of how the United States of America struggled with inclusion from the beginning. Even though the Constitution stated that all men are created equal, inequity was prevalent from the start. Which branch of the government can make laws? Judicial branch, legislative branch, executive branch. That's right, it was the legislative branch. This is the main duty of the legislative branch. Let's try it again. Which branch of the government can send troops to stop domestic disputes resulting in riots? Judicial branch, legislative branch, executive branch. That's right, it was the executive branch. The president serves as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Let's try one last time. Which branch of the government can overrule cases from lower courts? Judicial branch, legislative branch, executive branch. That's right, it was the judicial branch. The Supreme Court is in charge of reviewing court cases from lower courts when necessary. Section 3. Social and Cultural Development. The new Constitution created a Bill of Rights to protect the rights of its citizens, but fell short of ensuring inclusion and rights for all citizens. Before the American Revolution, colonists believed Parliament and the King had violated the individual liberties of its people. During the debate over the ratification of the Constitution, many people argued that the Constitution should include a bill of specific individual liberties that the national government would be obligated to protect. The framers of the Constitution developed a list of 10 approved by the states. They became known as the Bill of Rights. They were 1. Freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. 2. Right to bear arms. 3. Freedom from quartering, no soldiers to forcibly house in homes. 4. Freedom from unreasonable search and seizure. 5. Right to not incriminate yourself, speak against yourself in court. 6. Right to a free, fast, and fair trial. 7. Right to trial by jury. 8. Freedom from unreasonable bail or cruel and unusual punishments. 9 and 10. The right to reserve any powers not specifically given to the federal government for the states or the people. Of course, even though the rights and freedoms are written as if they applied to everyone, using the words all people and no person, they did not apply equally or at all to women, Native Americans, or enslaved persons. That would not happen until much later, after the passage of the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments and numerous civil rights laws in the 20th century. Which amendment included the freedom of religion, speech, and press? The First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the 10th Amendment, none of them. That's right, the answer is A. The First Amendment included 5 fundamental freedoms: freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. It's hard to imagine what life in this country would be like without them. Today, the population of the United States is still debating intensely about political policy and what is right for America. So many years later, our leaders still argue about what the Constitution actually means and how it applies today. Consider this. What rights do you want that are currently not available to you? Who or what is the governing body that would grant you those rights?